What's good, creative fam? Brandon Washington here. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, and I got both cameras. Let's jump into it. This is the Canon EOS R, and when it first came out, the eye autofocus on this thing, for lack of better words, was trash. It had eye autofocus, but it was only in single shot, which meant it would track the eye, but the second you have held down that shutter in order to pull focus, it would stop tracking the eye and pretty much making it useless whenever tracking moving subjects. Since then, Canon has done a lot of software updates, including updating that eye autofocusing system. Since updating this, however, Sony has also been updating their system on the a7 III and beyond to update their eye autofocus. So the other weekend, a good friend of mine, Jason Osborne, had a good creative meetup, and I decided I would take both of these cameras out, test them out with their own native lenses, their 16-35 2.8 equivalents, to see just how good the eye autofocus was on both of these systems. The goal for this test was very simple. I was gonna test these two cameras in multiple different situations to see how the eye autofocusing system actually stood up. First, I decided to test them with backlight. So when I got to the event, I went ahead and found a model who'd be more than happy to kind of pose with both of these cameras. And I started off testing the Sony with the harsh backlight. Now, in this situation, I basically had the sun directly behind my model, kind of pointing directly into the lens to see how good the eye autofocus system would work. When shooting with the Sony, I found that it really didn't struggle that much. However, sometimes it would kind of bounce back and forth between the face and the eye. Whenever it was dealing with direct sunlight, this was more so the issue. However, with proper posing and picking the right angle, you can actually hide the sun behind your model. And with the Sony, after I did that, I had no more problems with the eye autofocus. Now, when it came to the Canon, I pretty much had the exact same issues. Anytime the sun was pointing directly into the actual lens, it would struggle trying to capture that eye. One thing I did find though was that, however, even though sometimes I was able to block the sun with my model, the Canon would still sort of miss focus, but instead of switching to the face, it would kind of just start looking around the entire scene, sometimes focusing on her shirt or even focusing on the background. I'm not really sure what would cause this other than having that like bright lighting source. However, I will say that in this situation, Sony definitely did a whole lot better than the Canon. Now, after doing that first test, I kind of wanted to just kind of reset and kind of go back to the basics and find a good location with another model and put these cameras in a situation where they should both do really well. So instead of having like a harsh backlight or putting them in the shadows or anything like that, I decided to just try to get some really good photos with these two. Again, shooting with both of these cameras with their 16-35 equivalent lenses, I went ahead and started just photographing this model at 35 millimeters. As you can see with each of these, they both did really well. I mean, shooting at 35 is a little wide for a portrait. However, I decided I wanted to shoot everything a little bit wider because I've shot with both of these cameras using, a portrait lens, and they both just do great with portrait lenses. But shooting on wide is typically where you'll start to find some of their limitations. But both of these in this condition, they both did just great. Now, before we jump into the third situation that I put these two cameras in, I wanted to let you guys know that all the photos that you're seeing in this video were all edited using my Lightroom and LUT preset bundle. And if you're liking the content that you're seeing on this channel, definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button. So the third situation that I put these two cameras in was in a darker situation. Now, obviously we were out at a park, so I wasn't gonna find anything too dark. However, I found a model that was kind of doing her own thing, modeling with some other photographers, kind of in this little shaded bush kind of area. So I decided I was gonna go ahead and go over there, take both cameras, and try to get some photos. This was one of the areas where I really tried to push these two cameras. Because there was kind of some backlighting, I decided to underexpose each of these shots in order to preserve some of the highlights that were kind of peeking through the bushes in the back, but also to see how good these cameras would do in such a low light situation. Now, first I shot with the Sony, and I have to say that even though it was pretty low light, the Sony did really well. In fact, it was doing so well, I kind of wanted to like really push it. So I started having the model kind of twirl and do some, spins to see how well the Sony would actually do with losing the face and finding it again. And honestly, the Sony did very well. In fact, when the model actually was turning, I found that the Sony would actually hold focus for a moment and then wait to see if that face would come back before jumping to find the next autofocus point. However, it wasn't quite the same with the Canon. Whenever I shot it with the Canon, when she was first there in the low light, there was no issues. It actually did really well with the low light. However, once the model started turning, the Canon kind of started jumping to find focus points. It would jump from the back of her head to her outfit to the background. And in this situation, I actually found myself missing a couple shots, which really kind of sucked. I mean, the shots literally turned out blurry because it was trying to find where to focus, even though her face was back in frame. I know that Canon has like a really awesome video dual pixel autofocusing system, and a lot of times with that, whenever it's doing facial tracking and then once the face leaves the frame, it'll actually hold that focus point until the face comes back. I'm not really sure why it doesn't do that when it's doing the eye autofocusing system, but that is one thing to keep in mind, is that it did struggle, especially when that model started spinning. All right, and then the fourth and final test I decided to do with these two cameras was to shoot them at their widest point. So as I mentioned before, I was shooting both of them with the 16 to 35 millimeter lenses. And so I decided to put them both at 16 to get a shot. Really, primarily, I wasn't really worried about framing or, you know, random people in the background. I was primarily just trying to see if I could make the face smaller. How small would the eye autofocus system actually be able to go before it lost? And again, to pretty much no one's surprise at this point, I bet, the Sony did great. Now, of course, it would struggle a little bit kind of going back and forth between the face and the eye, but for the most part, it was able to hold onto the eye really well. I mean, there was some points where I was like, really, it's switching to the face now? Like it would jump from face to eye. And I'm not sure if it was because she was kind of side lit by the sun or what the case was there. But I did find that the Sony did really good at still holding the eye, even when shooting as wide as 16, and the model being, you know, having her face be much smaller in the frame. Continuing along, when it came to the Canon, pretty much I saw the same thing. The same way the Sony kind of struggled switching back and forth between the face and the eye, the Canon pretty much just did the same thing. In this situation, they both were pretty much identical. They both did really good, especially with such a small frame, you know, looking for something like the eye in such a wide frame and it being such a small area of the actual photo in general, but they both did really good about tracking down the eye. To kind of wrap it up, I decided to take some portraits of this model with both cameras shooting at 35 millimeters. And again, with the eye autofocusing system, they both just did great. Now, real quick before I jump into my final thoughts on these two cameras, I have to give a huge shout out to you guys. That's right, the creative fam. When I was at this meetup, I met quite a few of you guys, and it was so awesome to actually get a chance to talk with you guys, talk cameras, talk about the channel, talk about how I've helped you guys and what you guys have learned and how you guys have continued to get better. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone that actually got a chance to meet at this meetup, but also to all the other creative fams who've been dropping in the comments a lot recently. We've been seeing tons of engagement grow up on this channel, and that's only helping this channel to get better, so shouts out to you guys. All right, so what were my final findings on these two cameras? I'm pretty sure it's no surprise to anyone, but yeah, the Sony definitely crushed it in the eye autofocusing test. I mean, between these two cameras, obviously Sony has been doing it a lot longer, and they have, you know, somehow come up with some type of magic that just makes their eye autofocusing system just work flawlessly no matter what situation it's in. However, I will say that I was really pleasantly surprised with the Canon. The Canon's brand new eye autofocusing system, it does rival the Sony quite a bit. In my opinion, if you're someone who has Canon DSLRs and you've been thinking about going mirrorless because you want some like those mirrorless type features like the EVF, like eye autofocusing, and you're like, man, I really want to go with the Sony because it has eye autofocusing, but Canon now has it and I already have a ton of Canon lenses, trust me, you'll be really happy with the eye autofocusing system that the Canon offers. That being said, of course, the Sony is still better, so that's definitely a question that you're gonna have to ask yourself, but I will say that both of these cameras did a really good job with eye autofocusing, and at this point in today's world with these mirrorless cameras, it's really pretty much a no-brainer that every photo that's taken, the eye should almost always be perfectly tack sharp because the cameras at this point are doing all the hard work for us. But like I said earlier, all the photos that you saw in this video were all edited using my LUT and Lightroom preset pack bundle. So definitely make sure you check that out. Link to that down in the description. But let me know what you guys thought of these two cameras and the eye autofocusing system. Which one do you prefer? Have you gotten a chance to try them both out? What do you think? Let me know down below. But thanks so much for checking out this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.